All right, so you're curious exactly what weapons your ancestor carried in the American Civil War, or maybe your favorite regiment, you want to do some research and again find what accoutrements they had, what weapons they carried when they fought on campaign. So then you dive into the federal ordnance returns that were issued quarterly and found in the National Archives and made easily searchable and filterable on the research arsenal. So those of you who may be like me, a hobby historian, doesn't really know a whole lot about the primary records and research, would click on these ordnance returns and kind of get intimidated pretty quick. But what we're going to do is we're going to walk through what these ordnance returns are, how they're laid out, to where you can really extract that valuable information out and get a bigger picture and a greater insight into the personal story of the men who fought the American Civil War. So the first thing to realize about the ordnance returns that are found on the Research Arsenal database is that they actually came from microfilm from the National Archives. There's actually 8 rolls of microfilm, and they're broken into infantry, cavalry, and artillery. Roll 1 is artillery throughout the entire war. Rolls 2 and 3 are cavalry throughout the entire war. And rolls 4 through 8 are all the major active regiments, both Eastern Theater and Western Theater, that fought the American Civil War. In fact, the National Archives microfilm goes actually to, there's some ordnance returns from 66, 67, there's a couple from the 1870s as well. But what you'll notice is when you click on one of those ordnance returns from the gallery into the single image view, you'll notice at the bottom of the main image, you may see other images related to it. So if you clicked on an artillery ordnance return or a cavalry ordnance return, you will see below the main image other images that you can scroll and search. Because why? Artillery, for instance, out of the roll 1 of artillery, the artillery have 8 separate pages that list everything they had. The cavalry have 3 separate pages listing everything they had, and then the infantry only has 1 image. And so if you click on an infantry regiment, you're not going to see any images to scroll through at the bottom. You'll just see that 1 main image. So then go ahead, click on the actual single image to where you can zoom in. And this is the fun about discovering your own research and looking at the ordnance returns from any regiment during the Civil War. Once you click on that image, you click the zoom filter, you can actually see, and this is one of my favorite things, you can actually see each company of your regiment or of your unit. So company A, B, C, D, all the way, for most part, all the way to company M, although there are some instances where that's not always true. But basically A through M, and there is 1 letter missing. I'll leave that for you guys to comment in the notes what letter is missing on federal companies. So then, in addition to the companies, right next to that it lists the location they were stationed or camping when they turned in these reports. And this is what I love, again, just diving into the history of my favorite regiment or unit, or the regiment that my ancestor fought in. You can actually see where they were camped, where they were stationed when they actually turned in these ordnance returns. Okay, so they have the location, which gives you great insight. And then from that point on, then all the columns and rows kind of lay out in numerical fashion how many of each item that company had. So keep in mind, and those of you who are in the artillery or cavalry side of things, you have multiple pages to go through. And here's the problem that you need to be aware. Once you're off of page 1, there's no reference of which company, which regiment, or what unit you're on. You'll notice on the left-hand side and the right-hand side, on either extreme of the page, you have line numbers, basically 1 through 60-ish. And so once you find that and you remember what number, what line you're on, then when you scroll through page 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or artillery 8, you'll be able to keep that line going to know exactly, to stay on the company that you're actually looking for. So when it comes to cavalry and artillery, definitely make sure you pay attention to what line you're on when you're looking for that specific company of the regiment or the unit that you're researching. Because you're going to have to scroll back and just scroll the other way and scroll back, makes it kind of difficult to stay on point or stay in line. So beyond that, you can just look through the numbers, look through each column, each section, and figure out what that unit was issued. So let's go through, I'm going to go through the artillery and infantry and cavalry and kind of talk about each of the major sections that are on these pages. So starting with the artillery, let's kind of go through this. Up on the top, we'll kind of go through the headers at the top. It starts with, class 1 ordnance and class 2 ordnance, but then really it gets into which artillery pieces they had with their smoothbore rifled guns. They have to list what's unserviceable. The next section is Class 2 artillery carriages. So again, which carriages, caissons, forges, wagons, support vehicles, stuff like that. And of course, they have the last column, which is unserviceable. On page 2, so moving on to page 2, they have implements and equipments. Now, at the top, it's titled A through P, but you have things like axes and sights and buckets and implements and harnesses, pendulum tools, shovels, sponges, covers, rammers, all the stuff that you think of artillery is listed here, and they accounted for every single thing. Obviously, it's the military, so of course they did. On the third page, they listed worms and staves. They also listed each projectile from fixed shot, shell, case, canister. They also have the unique items as well, so like the Hotchkiss, the Dyers, the Jarns, of course the parrot equipment, and other, honestly, other pieces of equipment and other artillery pieces that I'm not even familiar with, because I'm more of a cavalry guy than artillery guy. But again, it lists all those pieces and each piece of ammunition that they carried. The next major section is their small arms, so they list the rifles, the muskets, sometimes carbines, in addition to the pistols and swords or sabers they may have carried. On page 4, they list the horse equipment, parts complete and incomplete, and list everything. I mean, harnesses, horse equipment, saddles, everything you can think of is listed on that page 4. Page 5 includes cloth, rope, thread, and what I find interesting about artillery is they actually list horse medicine and veterinary care equipment. Why do I think that's interesting? Is because if you go to the cavalry pages, they don't list that, or at least in this context. So kind of interesting that the cavalry didn't list veterinary medicine, horse medicine, and veterinary equipment, but yet the artillery did. Page 6 goes into awls, axes, brushels, chisels, files, hammers. Page 7 goes on to the punches, the rasps, the saws, shears, more shovels, squares and vices, and just general tools for the guys to work. And it still goes on and on and on after that. And so this is what I love about artillery. You have 8 pages to look and really dive down into what equipment that company, that unit, that battery actually had. So all right, let's go ahead and dive into the cavalry side of things. So if you're actually looking at the microfilm, it's rolls 2 and 3 throughout the entire war. Now the cavalry, again, had 3 pages of information, much shorter than the artillery 8, but still nowhere near the infantry 1 page. Let's dive into the cavalry. So the first page lists the rifles, breech-loading carbines, and muzzle-loading carbines that cavalry regiment had, in addition to the revolvers and pistols, and of course it ends on the far right of the page. It ends with sabers. Now, you'll notice that for the carbines, it lists all the major carbines that the cavalry had during the war. It also lists every major pistol from not just the Colt Army and the Colt Navy, but other ones as well. And I want you guys to comment below on what your favorite abstract pistol is that's listed in the Ordnance returns, not including the Army or Navy. And honestly, not even including the Remington, because that's kind of common-ish as well. Go ahead and look and see what your other favorite one is. That is kind of interesting and unique from that perspective. Now, the second page of the cavalry returns starts with the horse equipment. We get into things like the leather goods and belts, cartridge boxes, cap boxes, then we get into holsters, then bridles, halters, link straps, blankets, saddles, bullet molds, cones, and spare parts. And of course, then ending on page 3, the screwdrivers, other tools, tampions, and total rounds of ammunition. Now, of course, being a cavalry historian myself, I really find it intriguing when you look at and compare the numbers. So for instance, the number of saddles rarely match the number of saddle blankets or halters or even bridles. Now granted, I'm sure that the company or the quartermaster sergeant or the regimental side of things, they had maybe a pile or a stock of extras, but really gives you an insight, especially when you add that to the number of weapons that company had. It gives you an insight to the total combat effective numbers that unit had. And when you really combine that to the morning returns, now granted, right now we don't have a whole lot of morning returns, but the ones we do have, when you combine that regiment's morning returns to the number of combat effective individuals they had, then compare that to the number of rifles listed in the Ordnance returns for that month, it's amazing on, sometimes they agree, sometimes they disagree, and you're kind of left wondering what happened. And that's what I love about primary records and research to the American Civil War. That's what I love about the research arsenal, when you can combine the Ordnance returns with the letters and diaries of the soldiers who fought in that regiment. You can really start painting together a picture of what those guys went through during the American Civil War. Now, lastly, let's end with the infantry. Again, the infantry only has 1 page, and if you you just go across the headings at the top, it starts with those first class arms, starting with the Springfield and then going on to more obscure weapons. Now, one thing that is interesting about the arms, especially the first class arms, in one column it lists Springfield rifles. Now, in that line it lists the 55, 61, and 63 Springfields. So if you're really trying to narrow down on what weapon exactly or what model your ancestor carried, whether it was a 61 Springfield or a 63 Springfield, unfortunately the Ordnance Returns doesn't really dictate that, but at least you'll be able to narrow down to Springfield versus Enfield or French or Muscatoon or something along those lines. So then moving on, it includes Colt revolving rifles, the Henrys, the Merrills, the Sharps rifles, also the Spencer rifle, the Dresden. Then it gets into the Frenches, the Enfields, the light French. And then what I find interesting is the second and third class arms. If you take a look at what they list muskets, the 69 caliber, 1842 musket, the Belgian or the French 71 caliber. And so after you get through the rifles or the firearms, then you get into these swords or sabers. I guess infantry would be specifically swords. After the swords, you get into the accoutrements. So the cap pouches, the bayonet scabbards, gun slings, belt plates. And then after that, the appendages like screws, cones, bullet molds. And it ends, for the most part, with total rounds of ammunition. And so this is what I love, again, about primary research, is you really can put together and like, hey, we had 32 belts in this company, but only 15 actual belt buckles. What they do with the rest? Maybe they private purchased, figured something out, or it was non-issue items. In addition to what weapons they had. Did they have their cartridge box slings or did they not? Did they have gun slings for their rifles or not? So I'll go ahead, I'll end it there. I hope this helped you guys navigate the Ordnance Returns. If you haven't already become a member of the Research Arsenal, we strongly recommend that you join one of the largest, fastest growing Civil War research communities out there. We have one of the largest Civil War letters database that is keyword searchable, digitized. You can look at the actual letters and the transcription right by themselves and then filter out to, again, what your favorite unit. You can even search whatever keyword you want. We also have, like I said, Ordnance Returns that we just went through and photographed. There's so much that we have that gives access to the hobby historian that only the professional historian had access to. And since you stayed this long in the video, use the promo code RESEARCH to get a 15% discount on your annual membership. And this is how you support the channel. We don't have a Patreon. We don't have anything that you subscribe to and then we get more videos. We want to offer just access to this database and that's how you actually support our channel. So thanks for watching this episode and of course, happy searching.